Why do people support Donald Trump? And why do people vote for Donald Trump? Well, you know what? These are actually two very different questions, or at least more different than you might think. Democrats and progressives are going to need to consider the latter question quite a bit more than the former question, in my opinion, as they run against Donald Trump and try to stop him from getting a second term in the White House. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to need to win over people who are interested in voting for Trump. But when it comes to people who support Trump, who actually don the MAGA hats, go to Trump rallies, and are enthusiastic about him, they might just be too far gone. It might just be impossible to win them over. But Harris and Walz need to win over people in the middle. And those are people who might just vote for Trump. They might not see him as that bad of a guy. They might see him as reasonable. They might have watched him on Joe Rogan and thought, you know what? It might be fun to have a beer with that guy or something like that. And that's just the way it is. The average American voter sees what they see. They don't see what they don't see. They read what they read, and they don't read what they don't read. They can only know so much about American politics. People have lives to live. People have news that they pay attention to and news that they would rather not pay attention to. Americans are more likely to pay attention to the fact that inflation was lower under Donald Trump than the fact that the top 1% got a massive tax cut under Trump, while the middle income people and the lower income people didn't even get a permanent tax cut under Trump. His tax bill was a giveaway to the top 1%. But most people aren't aware of that. So that's just one example of how regular Americans might be swayed to vote for a guy like Donald Trump. So what gets people to support him, first of all? And I think this is actually, unfortunately, the easier question to answer. I want to read this take that I saw the other day, actually today, from Crystal Ball on Trump supporters. And this was in the wake of the recent rally where Trump had all these speakers like Dr. Phil and Tucker Carlson and RFK Jr. So this is what Crystal Ball said on Breaking Points with Sagar and Jetty. The implicit deal that Trump has with his supporters is basically, you give me unending loyalty, and I will give you permission to indulge the ugliest parts of yourself. I mean, Tucker Carlson came close to saying it. He said something to the effect of, what we love about Trump is he's given us permission to tell the truth. Which is preposterous when you look at a guy like Trump, who probably lies more than like literally any other political figure we've ever seen. But what he means by that is now we can tell the racist joke about black people and watermelons, or, call Puerto Rico a pile of garbage. We can label our political opponents as the enemy within and threaten to turn the military on them and label them literally the Antichrist or the devil. We can do all of those things. We don't have to pretend that we have this veneer of polite society. It's not about policy, because we've seen him be all over the map. We've seen this policy platform this time around totally different than what it was in 2016. Now, I would only slightly disagree on that last part there, that Trump's platform is not necessarily totally different from what it was in 2016. In some ways, it's kind of similar, but it's got some additional extremism caked in there, I would argue. I mean, he still hasn't given up being tough on immigration. He still hasn't given up on tariffs. He was a fan of tariffs in 2016. But for the rest of that statement, I mean, she's speaking a lot of truth there. At the end of the day, it seems like spite politics. We're trying to spite the people that we don't like. The media, the establishment, so the so-called establishment, the libs, as they say. Trump says whatever he wants about them. He will tell Democratic congresswomen who are people of color to go back to their country. He tweeted that in 2019. He said it, so they can say it too. They feel authorized by his behavior to do what they want. I mean, there's other things too, like, saying the China virus back during COVID. That was obviously controversial. Once Trump gives them the green light by simply saying something, they feel fulfilled and they vote for him. They love it when he says fake news and the media is the enemy of the people. It makes them feel comfortable in their contempt for mainstream media. They ignore the fact that Fox News is biased, but basically they can deflect all criticism of Trump as Trump derangement syndrome fueled by CNN and MSNBC. I mean, yeah, we've seen this playing out for about 7 years now, arguably even longer, that this is unfortunately the way that they are. They will work backwards from their conclusion that Trump good. They will dodge all criticisms of him. They will say, well, actually, even if he's bad in this way, the Democrats are worse, so we need to vote for Trump. Or they'll just ignore it and say it's a good thing. Meanwhile, if Democrats say anything that can be considered remotely offensive, and yes, they do sometimes, consider Joe Biden's "you ain't black" comment from 2020. They will seize on it so hard, they will never let the Democrat live it down. They will act like this is just the worst thing ever. So yeah, they fall in line behind their guy because he makes them feel like they have permission to act poorly, to conduct themselves childishly, and to insult others. But the question of why they vote for Trump is something of a different nature. As I said at the start of this video, people don't know everything about Trump. People don't know everything about Kamala Harris. People don't know about everything that happened under Donald Trump. People might forget about some of that stuff. Remember the COVID pandemic in 2020. I mean, those were not good times. A lot of conservatives even have criticisms of Trump, that he was too deferential to Dr. Anthony Fauci. A lot of progressives definitely have criticisms of Trump. They think that had he handled it better, he could have saved thousands of lives, maybe even 100,000 or so. Yeah, there was a recession even in 2020. Things were not excellent. And we can find elements of Trump's behavior during the pandemic to criticize or praise. But the fact is, things were not necessarily good when Trump left office. Keep in mind January 6th. But does the average American voter see January 6th and think that it's more important than their ability to buy groceries, to afford things? Not necessarily. At the same time, are Joe Biden and Kamala Harris preventing them from being able to afford gas and groceries? No. I mean, there's been virtually no evidence that Biden and Harris are responsible for the increase in inflation that started, by the way, in early 2021. Shortly after Trump left office, and really barely even after Biden signed the American Rescue Plan. It's just a far cry to say that Biden caused inflation, that his economic policies, which were pretty much just in their infancy at the time, caused this massive inflation that we saw start up so early on in his presidency. But the average American voter doesn't necessarily know that. They'd say, oh, well, inflation seemed like it was lower under Trump. It's higher now. Biden's been in office for years now, so I'm going to vote against that, which inflation has gone down recently, to be fair, but people probably still think about those things, the economy. There's also the issue of foreign policy. Recently, something came up that some Muslim voters in Michigan were backing Trump because of the Israel-Gaza policy. Now, they would benefit from knowing more of the full context, and they may know the full context, I don't know, but that Trump uses Palestinian as a slur. He called Joe Biden a very bad Palestinian on the debate stage in June of this year. And yeah, I mean, he's been very, very sycophantic to Benjamin Netanyahu, very sympathetic to Israel and the IDF, saying that they should finish the job in Gaza. Basically saying more brutality is required. Harris and Biden, they're not going far enough. They need to allow Israel to do whatever they want, whenever they want. Nuke Gaza, heck, that might even happen if Trump gets elected. But yeah, this is something, people can't know everything about Trump. People can't know everything that happened under him. That's why it's incumbent upon us to do the research, to get to know the policies, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so we can let people know. If there's something genuinely good that they're giving him praise for, acknowledge that. But then give them the full context. Point out the bad and the ugly. Yes, inflation was not massive under Trump. But guess what? There are other things you need to consider too. Biden did not cause the increase in inflation that we've seen over the past 3 years or so. So, yeah, the answer to why people vote Trump, it's very complex. It's very hard to understand. I've tried to summarize it to the best of my ability within a short video at least. I mean, I could go on like a video essay for hours, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave you with the idea that, hey, you don't know what you don't know. Not everybody is looking at studies about economic policy. Not everybody knows about Trump's foreign policy. Some of his hawkish actions, like assassinating a top Iranian general in 2020, launching a missile strike against Syria in 2017, nearly sparking war with Kim Jong-un over Twitter, calling him Little Rocket Man, just aggressive foreign policy, vicious tweets against other world leaders. And that was stuff that people talked about under Trump, but people don't really talk about it anymore. It's like people just forget. So part of that might be the forgetfulness. In 2024, people are like, hey, kind of want this guy back. You know, it felt like things were a little better under him. I don't know what he did, but it feels like things were better. And we saw, to be fair, look, we saw some of that under Trump toward Obama, actually. There were people like, hey, I wish Obama were back. I thought he was a nice guy, and it felt like things were better under him. He was a good leader. He was really calm and collected and charismatic. I like that guy. I wish we had him instead. We have a tendency to look back on the past with rose-colored glasses. And that's not even speaking about George W. Bush and how his approval rating has gone up and up and up since he left office, with now nearly 50% of Democrats saying they approve of him. So yeah, there's a memory issue, there's a knowledge issue, and there's a policy ignorance issue, unfortunately. And this will lead Americans to vote for Trump. They'll look back fondly on the past in some ways. Maybe in some ways it's justified, but in a lot of ways it's not. And they'll cast their vote for him. So I think that the more that people who are centrists, people who are progressive, understand these issues, understand the disconnect, the better we'll be able to address people who are planning to vote for Trump. We got 1 week till the election, so it's like, hey, how much of a change can we really make in people's minds at this point? At this point, we just got to get people who are centrist or left-leaning to go out and vote, make their voices heard, and yeah, don't sleep on this election. But yeah, I hope that you liked this video. I went on for a little longer than I usually do. That's fine. We love a long video. But yeah, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in my next video.